My name is Natalie Bennett, and I'm 33 years old. 8 months ago, the man I planned to marry sat across from me and said words that should have shattered me. I've already hired a lawyer. We're done. The room went quiet. I smiled. Not because I wasn't hurt, not because I didn't care, but because by the time Ethan Carter finally made his move, I'd already spent weeks preparing for it. What he didn't know was that a file sitting quietly in my attorney's office contained enough truth to unravel every lie he'd told me for months. And the most dangerous thing about that file wasn't what was inside it. It was the fact that Ethan never imagined it existed. The funny thing is, if you'd met us a year earlier, you would have called us one of those couples everyone envies. We'd been together for 4 years. We met at a friend's birthday party. He was charming, ambitious, and effortlessly confident. The kind of man who could make an entire room laugh without trying. I worked in project management for a healthcare technology company. Ethan worked in marketing for a major software firm. We both earned good money. We traveled. We hosted dinners. We argued occasionally. Like every couple. But nothing dramatic. 2 years into our relationship, we bought a condo together. A beautiful corner unit overlooking the river. Last year, he proposed. I said yes. The wedding was scheduled for the following fall. At least, that was the plan. Looking back now, the cracks appeared long before I admitted they existed. About 6 months before everything exploded, Ethan started changing. At first it was subtle, small enough to dismiss. His phone was always face down. Notifications disappeared before I could glance at them. He began taking calls on the balcony. Sometimes he'd smile at messages and then immediately lock the screen when I walked into the room. When I asked if everything was okay, he'd laugh. Work is insane lately. I wanted to believe him, so I did. Trust has a strange way of making obvious things invisible. Then came the late nights. 3 times a week. Sometimes 4. Meetings. Deadlines. Client presentations. Always a new explanation. Always delivered with enough confidence to sound believable. I kept telling myself I wasn't the jealous type. I wasn't going to become one of those suspicious partners who checked phones and interrogated every detail. I loved him, and I trusted him. At least, I thought I did. Then, one Thursday night, everything changed. Not because I went looking for answers, because I accidentally found them. Ethan had fallen asleep on the couch. His laptop sat open on the coffee table. I was walking past and noticed the battery warning flashing. I reached over to close it. Then I saw a message. A single sentence. I can't stop thinking about yesterday. My stomach dropped. I don't know why. Maybe some instinct already knew. Maybe part of me had been waiting for proof. I clicked. What followed felt like watching my future burn in slow motion. Dozens of messages. Then hundreds. At first they looked innocent, friendly, playful. Then they became flirtatious. Then intimate. Then devastating. There were hotel reservations, photos, private jokes, plans for lunch breaks that clearly weren't lunch breaks. Messages sent minutes after he'd kissed me goodbye in the morning. Messages sent while I sat beside him on the couch. Messages sent while we discussed wedding venues. For 4 months. 4 months. 4 months of lies, carefully disguised as normal life. I remember sitting there in silence, my hands shaking, my chest tight. I wanted to wake him up. I wanted to scream. I wanted answers. Instead, I kept reading. Painful truth is still truth. And I needed all of it. The woman was someone from his office. A coworker. A woman named Vanessa. The deeper I looked, the worse it became. She wasn't just another employee. She was his direct supervisor. A fact that would become important later. Very important. When I finally closed the laptop, the sun was starting to rise. Ethan was still asleep. His head leaned against the couch cushion. Peaceful, comfortable, completely unaware that his secret life had just ended. I stood there staring at him. The man I loved. The man I planned to marry. The man who had spent 4 months looking me in the eyes while building another relationship behind my back. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. Not my love. That was already dying. My strategy? I realized anger would help him. Emotion would help him. A dramatic confrontation would only give him time to prepare, to hide things, to create his own narrative. No, I needed facts. So I took screenshots. Every message, every photo, every date, every conversation. Then I created folders, backups, copies. By morning, I had enough evidence to fill an entire archive. 3 days later, I sat in an attorney's office. A recommendation from my uncle years earlier suddenly became one of the most valuable phone calls I'd ever made. After reviewing everything, my attorney leaned back in his chair. Have you confronted him? No. Good. The word surprised me. Good. You only get the advantage of information once. He folded his hands. Let's keep it that way. We spent nearly 2 hours discussing finances. The condo, assets, contribution, questions I never expected to answer. Before a wedding, then he asked something important. Who paid most of the down payment? I did. How much? Around 70%. His eyebrows lifted. Documentation. I have everything. Bank transfers. Wire confirmations. Receipts. Contracts. I was meticulous with finances, a habit Ethan once teased me about. Now it might save me hundreds of thousands of dollars. For the next 2 weeks, I lived a double life. Every night I'd come home. Ethan would ask about my day. I'd smile, answer normally. Ask about his. He'd lie. Smoothly, effortlessly, as if dishonesty had become second nature, and every lie added another page to my file. Meanwhile, another idea had begun forming in my mind. A quiet one. A dangerous one. Because while reviewing those messages, I hadn't just discovered an affair. I discovered something else. A workplace relationship that violated company policy. A supervisor involved with a direct subordinate. The kind of situation HR departments take very seriously. One Tuesday at 2 a.m. After staring at the evidence for nearly an hour, I finally opened a burner email account. Then, I began typing. I wrote the email like a concerned employee. Professional. Clean. No emotion. No threats. Just facts. I attached the screenshots that showed Ethan and Vanessa clearly discussing their relationship, their meetings, and the fact that she had influence over his projects. Then I sent it. After that, I waited. For 2 weeks, Ethan came home more tense than usual. He said HR had started asking questions. He said there were internal politics. He said Vanessa was under pressure. I nodded. I made tea. I asked if he was okay. He looked me in the face and lied again. Then, one evening, he came home early. His face was pale. His hands trembled slightly as he placed his keys on the table. Natalie, he said. We need to talk. I closed my book. Okay. He sat across from me, but wouldn't meet my eyes. I've been unhappy for a while. There it was. The script. Not guilt. Not honesty. A performance? I think we want different things. He continued. Different futures. Different lives. I kept my voice calm. Where is this coming from? I've just realized this isn't working. He exhaled. Like he had rehearsed the line in a mirror. I want to end the engagement. I looked at him. Really looked at him. The man who thought he was surprising me. The man who thought he was walking away first. Then he said it. I've already hired a lawyer. We're done. The room went quiet. I smiled. Efficient. He blinked. What? You've already hired a lawyer. Already decided we're done. Very efficient. His confidence cracked for half a second. You're not going to fight this. Why would I fight someone who doesn't want to be here? He stared at me. Unsettled. I thought you'd be more upset. I am upset, I said. But I'm not going to beg. That bothered him more than tears would have. He had expected collapse. Instead, he got silence. He said his lawyer was available Tuesday. I said I'd be there. The weekend before the meeting was strange. Ethan slept in the guest room. He packed some things dramatically, as if I was supposed to ask him to stop. I didn't. He moved through the condo, touching picture frames and furniture, playing the wounded man ending a sad relationship, all while I knew the truth. Monday morning, I met my attorney again. I brought the file, bank records, mortgage contributions, furniture receipts, screenshots, dates, everything. He read quietly. Then he said, "This is strong. Will the affair matter legally? Not directly," he said. "But it matters when he tries to claim partnership, while betraying that partnership." Then I told him about HR, about Vanessa, about the anonymous report. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he smiled faintly. "You've been careful." I had 2 weeks to think, while he lied to my face. Tuesday arrived. Ethan's lawyer's office was in a downtown high-rise, with glass walls and expensive chairs. Ethan sat across from me in a navy suit, trying to look composed. His lawyer began smoothly. My client wants this to be amicable. He proposes a 50-50 split of all shared property and assets. My attorney opened his folder. That doesn't reflect actual contributions. My client provided 70% of the down payment and has paid a larger share of the mortgage. Ethan shifted. I didn't realize we were keeping score. I finally looked at him. You wanted fair. Fair requires math. His lawyer tried to recover. They shared a life. A 50-50 split recognizes that partnership. My attorney slid the first document across the table. Then let's discuss the partnership. Ethan's lawyer picked it up. At first, his face showed confidence, then confusion, then concern. He turned one page, then another. His jaw tightened. He looked at Ethan. You didn't mention this. Ethan's face flushed. That's private. No, I said quietly. That's relevant. The room changed. Power moved across the table like a shadow. Ethan's lawyer requested a private conversation. They left. 20 minutes passed. When they returned, Ethan's eyes were red. His lawyer no longer looked like a man ready to win. He looked like a man trying to reduce damage. We'd like to propose a different arrangement, he said. 60-40. 60 to Ms. Bennett. 40 to my client. My attorney glanced at me. I nodded. With one addition. I said, Ethan moves out within 30 days. I refinance the condo into my name. He receives his 40% of the equity. Clean break. Ethan looked at me like he finally understood I had not been waiting to be abandoned. I had been waiting for the right moment. His lawyer whispered to him. Ethan nodded. Agreed. We signed the preliminary papers. As we left, Ethan stopped near the elevator. You planned this. I pressed the button. No. Ethan, you planned this. I documented it. His mouth opened, then closed. For once, he had no lie ready. The moving truck arrived exactly 16 days later. Funny how quickly 4 years can fit into cardboard boxes. I watched from the living room window as movers carried furniture down the elevator one piece at a time. The dining table we'd picked together, the bookshelf Ethan insisted would make the place look sophisticated. The coffee machine he'd sworn was worth every dollar. Each item disappearing felt less like loss and more like evidence being removed from a crime scene. The condo grew quieter with every trip. Lighter, less crowded, less haunted. Ethan spent most of the day avoiding me. I was grateful for that. There was nothing left to discuss, nothing left to negotiate, nothing left to save. Late that afternoon, he carried out the last box himself. He stopped at the front door. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he looked around the condo, the place we'd once imagined raising children in, the place we'd decorated for holidays, the place where we'd planned a future that no longer existed. His eyes settled on me. I didn't think you'd be like this. I folded my arms, like wet, cold. The word almost made me laugh. Cold. As if discovering months of betrayal should have left me warm. As if protecting myself was somehow cruel. I loved you. Ethan. The past tense hit him immediately. I saw it in his expression. Saw the realization. The finality. I know. He said quietly. No. I replied. I don't think you do. His shoulders dropped. I made a mistake. I shook my head. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is sending a text to the wrong person. His face tightened. What I found wasn't a mistake. I stepped closer. It was hundreds of decisions. Silence. It was hotel reservations. Silence. It was lies. Silence. It was 4 months of waking up every morning and choosing deception. His eyes drifted downward. For the first time, I thought I saw genuine shame. Not regret for losing me. Not regret for getting caught. Real shame. But, by then, it didn't matter. I'm sorry, he whispered. I stared at him and realized something surprising. I felt nothing. Not anger. Not satisfaction. Not sadness. Nothing. The wound had already scarred over. You should go. He nodded slowly, picked up the box, and walked out. The door closed behind him, and just like that, 4 years ended, with the sound of a latch clicking shut. The next morning, I changed the locks. By the afternoon, I updated the security codes. By evening, I had scheduled painters. The bedroom walls became a different color. The furniture moved. Pictures came down. New artwork went up. I wasn't redecorating. I was reclaiming. A week later, The condo finally felt like mine. Not ours. Mine. And that's when the second wave of consequences began. About a month after Ethan moved out, mutual friends started talking. Apparently, HR's investigation had concluded. The anonymous report had uncovered more than expected. A lot more. The relationship between Ethan and Vanessa had violated multiple company policies. The fact that she directly supervised him made everything worse. Performance reviews, project assignments, promotion recommendations. Every decision she'd made involving him suddenly became questionable. The company acted quickly. Vanessa was terminated, escorted out by security. Gone the same day. Ethan wasn't fired. But he wasn't untouched either. He was demoted, transferred, moved into a lower-level position, with reduced authority and reduced pay. His career trajectory changed overnight. One friend described him as looking 10 years older after it happened. Another said he'd become withdrawn, embarrassed, defensive. But the biggest surprise came a few weeks later. Vanessa left him. The affair that had apparently been worth risking everything for didn't survive public reality. Once secrecy disappeared, so did the excitement. Once consequences arrived, so did resentment. Friends whispered that they blamed each other. Vanessa claimed Ethan wasn't worth what she'd lost. Ethan blamed Vanessa for encouraging the relationship. Neither accepted responsibility, neither learned quickly, and neither stayed together. When I heard the news, I expected satisfaction, maybe even vindication. Instead, I felt something else. Relief. Because for months I'd wondered if I'd lost to someone better. Someone special. Someone extraordinary. But the truth was much simpler. He hadn't lost to love. I'd lost to selfishness. There's a difference. A huge difference. November arrived. My attorney called. The refinance is complete. I smiled. The words felt surreal. The condo is officially yours. Just mine. No shared ownership. No lingering ties. No remaining signatures. No loose ends. Everything finalized. Everything legal. Everything finished. After hanging up, I sat alone in my living room. Sunlight poured through the windows. The same windows Ethan and I once stood beside discussing wedding plans. And for the first time in months, I could breathe. Actually breathe. The pressure in my chest was gone. The constant anxiety. The endless questioning. The fear that I'd somehow lose everything I'd worked for. Gone. December brought the holidays. My first Christmas single in nearly 5 years. Family gatherings became unavoidable. Questions followed naturally. What happened? Where's Ethan? Is the wedding postponed? I gave most people the short version. We ended things. Moved on. That's all. But mothers are different. My mother cornered me in the kitchen while everyone else watched football. She studied my face for a long moment, then asked quietly, "What really happened?" I hesitated, then told her everything. The affair, the evidence, the lawyer, the settlement, the investigation. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she wrapped her arms around me. "I'm proud of you." I laughed softly. For getting cheated on. For surviving it. That answer hit harder than I expected. Because survival was exactly what it felt like. Not victory. Not revenge. Survival. "You never confronted him?" she asked. "No." "Why?" I stared into my coffee. Because by the time I found out, the relationship was already dead. She nodded slowly. I suppose screaming wouldn't have changed that. No. What would it have changed? I thought about it. The truth was simple. Nothing. It wouldn't have changed the affair. Wouldn't have changed the lies. Wouldn't have changed the outcome. It only would have warned him. Given him time. Given him leverage. Documentation had accomplished more than emotion ever could. My mother squeezed my hand. "Your father and I didn't raise a fool." For the first time that holiday season, I genuinely smiled. And somewhere deep inside, I realized I was finally healing. The new year arrived quietly. No crowded parties. No champagne countdown. No wedding planning spreadsheets. No discussions about guest lists or honeymoon destinations. Just me. A takeout container balanced on my coffee table, a movie playing in the background, and a strange sense of peace. At 10:30 that night, I went to bed. Not because I was sad. Not because I was lonely. Because, for the first time in months, I wasn't carrying someone else's deception on my shoulders. When I woke up the next morning, it felt like I had stepped into a different life. A smaller life. A simpler life. But an honest one. And honesty, I had learned, was worth more than comfort. January passed. Then February. Work was busy. Friends invited me out more often. I started saying yes. Little by little. I stopped defining my future by what had happened. Then one evening in February, my phone buzzed. A text message. A number I immediately recognized. Ethan. The first contact since he moved out. I stared at the screen. For several seconds. I considered deleting it. Instead, curiosity won. The message was short. I heard you're doing well. I'm happy for you. I almost ignored it. Almost. But eventually I typed back. Thanks. I'm doing well. Hope you're okay too. His response came quickly. I'm okay. New company. Fresh start. I stared at the words, fresh start. The phrase felt oddly familiar. It was exactly what I'd told myself, after he left. A few minutes later, another message appeared. I've been thinking about what happened. Then another. About how everything ended. Then, I handled it badly. I leaned back against the couch. Part of me expected anger, defensiveness, excuses. Instead, what arrived felt closer to surrender. I was selfish. I was a coward. I should have ended things before I started something else. For a moment, I simply looked at the screen. Months earlier, those words would have meant everything. Now they felt strangely distant. Like hearing an apology meant for someone I used to be. I finally responded. You should have. Several minutes passed. Then, I know. I lost everything. The words lingered, not because they made me happy, because they sounded genuine. For the first time since I'd known him, Ethan wasn't trying to manage a narrative. He wasn't trying to sound reasonable. He wasn't trying to justify himself. He was simply admitting reality. I lost my relationship, my career path, my self-respect, and it wasn't even worth it. I closed my eyes. 8 months earlier, I might have wanted him to suffer, wanted him to understand my pain, wanted him to experience consequences, but life had already handled that part. There was nothing left for me to do. I hope you learned something. I wrote. A minute later, his reply appeared. I did. Too late for us. But I did. I looked around my condo, the place that had become a symbol of everything I'd fought to protect, the place that once represented a shared future, and now represented something entirely different. Strength, independence, survival. I typed one final message. Take care of yourself. Ethan. You too. Natalie. That was the last conversation we ever had. I blocked his number afterward. Not out of anger, not out of spite. Because the chapter was finished. And finished things deserve to stay finished. Months have passed since then. Enough time to gain perspective. Enough time to understand what really happened. People often ask what the turning point was. They assume it was the conference room, the settlement, the lawyer, the affair, the HR investigation. They're wrong. The turning point happened the moment I found those messages, not because I discovered betrayal, because I made a decision, a silent adjustment, the most important adjustment of my life. I stopped reacting and started preparing. That adjustment changed everything. Before that night, I was a trusting partner, planning a wedding. After that night, I became someone determined to protect herself. Not out of bitterness, out of necessity. I documented, I organized, I prepared. While Ethan was building an affair, I was building evidence. While he was planning an exit strategy, I was protecting my future. While he was lying, I was collecting facts. And facts are remarkably powerful things. Facts don't panic. Facts don't cry. Facts don't forget. Facts simply exist, waiting for the moment they're needed. I often think back to that conference room. To the instant, Ethan's lawyer began reading the file. The subtle shift in his expression, the realization that his client hadn't told him the whole story. The moment, confidence turned into concern. It wasn't because the evidence was dramatic, it was because it was undeniable. Every screenshot, every receipt, every transfer, every document, every lie connected to proof. Truth organized into a language no one could argue with. That was the file Ethan never bothered to read. Not a legal file, not really. It was a record of his own choices, his own actions, his own betrayal. I simply assembled it. People have called me cold, calculated, even ruthless. Maybe they're right, but I don't see it that way. I see it as self-respect. I see it as refusing to let someone else's dishonesty destroy what I'd spent years building. I see it as learning that forgiveness and accountability are not the same thing. You can forgive someone someday. You can wish them well. You can let go of hatred and still refuse to let them take advantage of you. Today, I'm 33, single, happy, the sole owner of a home I nearly lost. A woman who learned lessons she never wanted, but desperately needed. I've learned that trust should be earned continuously, not granted blindly. I've learned that preparation isn't paranoia, it's wisdom. I've learned that protecting yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Most importantly, I've learned that love without honesty isn't love at all. It's performance. Ethan walked into that conversation believing he'd already won, believing he'd controlled the narrative, believing I'd be too emotional to fight back. He underestimated me, and that was his final mistake. Because while he was busy planning his escape, I was preparing my defense. While he was creating secrets, I was documenting truth. While he was assuming I would react, I was learning to prepare. The room went silent when he announced he'd hired a lawyer. I smiled because I'd hired mine weeks earlier. He thought he was making the first move. In reality, he was already several steps behind. And that's the difference between reacting to betrayal and preparing for it. One leaves you vulnerable, the other leaves you standing. My name is Natalie Bennett. I'm 33 years old. And the file Ethan Carter never bothered to read changed both our lives forever.